Thank you, Amos. I have a few instructions before we get started here. First of all, welcome to the Missouri Press Association Candidate Forum. I'd like to begin by introducing our participants and going over a few rules of the debate. Earlier today, candidates drew numbers to determine the order in which they will be making opening remarks. They are arranged on stage in that order. Starting closest to me, Democrat Crystal Quade, Republican Mike Kehoe, Libertarian Bill Slants, and Green Party candidate Paul Lehman. After candidates give their opening statements, I will ask the first question. Then we will proceed to questions from our panelists. They are Alvin Reed of the St. Louis American, Christine Temple of the Springfield Business Journal, and Lucas Presson of the Southeast Missourian in Cape Girardeau. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question. After each has had a turn, I will decide whether any rebuttal time is necessary. If so, candidates will receive an additional 30 seconds, but rebuttals will be reserved only for those candidates involved in criticisms. If candidates fail to answer a question, I also reserve the right to ask them to try again during the rebuttal time. The first question will go to the first candidate on my left. The second question will begin with the second candidate and so forth. And closing marks will be delivered in reverse order. Signs will be held up showing the time remaining during remarks. Candidates, please adhere to the stop sign. And audience, please hold your applause until today's event is over. With that, let's begin. Crystal Quade, you may deliver your opening statement.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First, thank you to the Missouri Press Association for hosting us, and of course to my fellow candidates for being here today, and welcome to my legislative district. I've had the great honor of representing the city of Springfield and Jefferson City for the last 8 years, 6 of those as the Democratic leader in the state house. I'm running for governor, frankly, because we deserve better than what we've been getting. Missouri ranks last in public education funding. We have crumbling roads and bridges, police shortages all across the state, and the state of Missouri can't even pay its child care bills on time. And the folks who've been in charge are doing anything but paying attention to those issues. You know, in 2019, I told my personal story of abuse on the House floor, warning my colleagues what would happen when they passed the most extreme abortion ban in the country. And instead of listening, they went forward. And now there is a bill and a law in place that does not have exceptions for the 12-year-old rape victim from her family member. There are women all across the state of Missouri right now bleeding out on their own bathroom floors because our doctors can't do their jobs. I'm running for governor because I will uphold the will of voters. I will get politicians out of your doctor's offices, out of your personal business, and protect your freedoms.
Mike Kehoe.
Well, thank you as well to the Missouri Press Association and the candidates who are willing to put their name on the ballot. I think most of you know my story. I was born to a single mother. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. And my brother and my sisters and I just worked odd jobs to literally put food on the table and keep a roof over our house. Most people would say I was at a disadvantage growing up. But I would argue that I had a family of love, of faith, and one that promoted hard work. And I lived in a country, in a state, where you start doesn't necessarily determine where you finish in life. I think all Missourians should be able to live the American dream, no matter what their background is or what neighborhood they grew up in. That's why I've been very, very involved in supporting and expanding Missouri's vocational and technical training to make sure Missourians are trained for the high-paying jobs that I know our employers have to offer. That's why I've tried to lead efforts to reduce burdensome regulation and red tape, cutting taxes for businesses so that they have the opportunity to invest capital in their businesses and provide for those jobs. I think Missouri's fundamental responsibility is that we provide safe neighborhoods, and that will be the thing we do, J1, by investing in the police, and that's why I'm running for governor.
Bill Slants.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the Missouri Press Association and for my fellow candidates on the dais up here. It's a great honor to be here. My name is Bill Slants. I'm your Libertarian candidate for governor. I want to tell you just a little bit of story here. I'm going to imagine yourselves riding down the road. You're driving your car into a very new territory, a city you've never been in before. And what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to turn the radio down. You sit up in your seats, and you start paying much closer attention to what's going on around you. As libertarians, and I know all of you are libertarians out there, most of you just don't know it, I'm asking you to stop letting the government drive. Sit up in your seat, pay attention to what's going on, and let's limit the government to its most basic functions. Thank you.
Paul Lehman.
I'm Paul Lehman. I grew up, was born and raised in southeast Missouri. We got a representative from there. And a family of 8 children. I have two children of my own and 3 grandchildren. I was educated at Southeast Missouri State University with a BS in education, and then from Eden Theological Seminary in St. Louis with a degree, a Master of Divinity degree, and so I'm an ordained minister. So I have education experience, I have a ministerial experience, and I want to run for governor to be able to be the first green governor of the state of Missouri. There's lots of things that the big, not elephant, but the big gorilla in the room is the need for green economy.
All right, candidates, thank you for those opening statements. We will now proceed to questions, and I will ask the first one. Missouri law currently prohibits abortion except in cases of medical emergency. A proposed constitutional amendment on the November ballot would create a right to abortion. Do you support this amendment? Why or why not? Crystal Quade, you are first.
I absolutely do support Amendment 3. You know, we had over 380,000 Missourians sign a petition in less than 3 months saying that they wanted to vote on this issue, and I'm very grateful that we were able to do so here in November. Look, as I mentioned in my opening, the law that we have in Missouri right now is the most extreme in the entire country, without exceptions for rape or incest. And I personally have received phone calls from women who have gone to doctor's offices during an active miscarrying situation and sent home being told that they're not close enough to death yet. Our doctors are scared to do their jobs. Over 800 doctors just signed a letter this very week saying that they supported Amendment 3 because they're scared to go to prison to give access to health care. While my opponent most recently said that he is willing to sacrifice his own campaign to make sure Amendment 3 goes down, I will be a governor that will listen to the will of voters and get politicians out of your doctor's offices.
Mike Kehoe.
Amendment 3, I think, could be one of the most harmful constitutional amendments I've ever seen on the ballot. I will do all I can to see that Amendment 3 is defeated. My wife and I are the mother and father of 4 kids, and I recently found out just in the last couple of weeks we're about to be a grandparent. I think that Missourians and elected officials' number one priority is protecting innocent life, the life of who can't speak for themselves. And I have had that conversation about exceptions, and I understand that there's some people that think that we need to work on that. But this law goes way too far. It's very extreme. I think there's a lot of problems in this wording of the ballot where it doesn't provide protections, appropriate protections to women, especially in the case of liability if there's a medical emergency. I just believe this law has gone too far. I would love to support other ways for families to grow, including adoption, measures that we can do with our state, and support pregnancy resource centers across our state to truly give women's health the proper role it needs and take care of our ladies across the state.
Bill Slants.
I'm personally opposed to abortion quite dramatically. However, this is not a government decision. This is not something that should be decided in Jeff City over a mass, one size fit all for everybody. It's unique to each and everybody. Each individual out there has a unique and individual decision to make. Abortion, like end-of-life decisions, should be done with a counsel of your most trusted person, your doctor, yourself, inner being. There's a very personal decision. The government should stay out of it. And having said that, there should be no government funding for abortions at all, period.
Paul Lehman.
I support the Amendment 3. The Green Party has been supportive of women's rights since day one, or since Roe v. Wade, and have championed that openly. And only recently have other parties stepped up to endorse that. My position on that is that people don't know what the trauma that women undergo, those who try to make that decision about whether or not to have abortion. And so we should remember that as government, that we have no business, as Bill said here, in the medical lives of individuals until viability. So I strongly endorse that measure so that we can have some kind of order and some kind of justice for women who are facing these very difficult decisions.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Alvin, and it will go first to Mike Kehoe. Alvin?
One of our November ballot measures would raise Missouri's minimum wage from its current amount of $12.30 an hour to $13.75 an hour next year and $15 an hour in 2026, with annual inflationary adjustments in following years. It also would require paid sick leave. Do you support this ballot measure? Why or why not?
Mike Kehoe.
As a Missouri businessman and somebody who's created hundreds of jobs over the 35-year period I've been in business, I would not be able to support the minimum wage petition. I believe that government should not be setting wages for people. I think the economy and business should. And when we change minimum wage standards, we actually affect those that we're trying to help the most. Minimum wages will cause prices to rise on the most basic of products. It also leaves a void for the youngest of people who want to start at an entry-level job. You take those jobs away from them, so you kind of create this false economy where kids don't have a job, and the products that the people who are buying, who can't afford it the most, the wages are going up on. We need to make sure that we let businesses set the wage. That's the appropriate place for that to happen, and that's where I think works best. Letting government involved in this does not work. The economy can set the prices.
Bill Slants.
Well, I agree with most of that. I oppose the minimum wage, absolutely. There should be no minimum wage in the state of Missouri. Entry-level jobs are not meant to be supporting of one's life or family. An entry-level job is a way to learn a skill. It's a way to learn, find your way into the workplace. Minimum wage, believe it or not, was actually invented to oppress those who are not qualified to, not in the unions or not in the tradespeople. They wanted to keep lower wage earners out of the workforce. So this is a completely upside down, backwards way of looking at things. I strongly oppose the minimum wage of any kind.
Paul Lehman.
I support the minimum wage amendment. In fact, the Green Party puts forth a $25 minimum wage goal, and that this is just partly on the way in a state that we live in. People need to be compensated for what they do. It's hard work for these low-income people, working poor, and then we want to suppress them even more by not allowing them a decent minimum floor for their wages. So I strongly support this and hope that we can use this as a platform for doing even more to support the poor in our economy. This goes across the board. It goes into the agricultural world as well, and where we need to upgrade do a kind of a complete overhaul of our agricultural system.
Crystal Quade.
I do, and this is yet another example where the status quo in Jefferson City is not listening to Missouri citizens and what their needs are. We've heard on this stage that minimum wage jobs are entry-level jobs and they're just for kids. The reality is we have so many parents and so many people who are working minimum wage jobs, multiple minimum wage jobs to get by because they can't actually find good quality, high-paying jobs in the state of Missouri. I absolutely support this amendment, but one of the things that I want to elevate for this is the earned sick leave. As a working parent myself, I understand what it means when my kid gets sick and I have to call in and wonder what that means for my job and my security. And I have, and prior to becoming a legislator, I've had good jobs, but not everybody has that affordability where their employer is flexible with them. And so a mandatory earned sick leave, a minimum wage for Missouri citizens is absolutely what we need, and we should be striving for that.
The next question will come from Christine, and we'll go first to Bill Slants. Christine?
A November ballot measure would legalize sports betting in Missouri. Do you support this amendment? Why or why not?
Bill?
Thank you for that, Christine. I do support sports betting in the state of Missouri. Why not? It's not going to hurt anybody. What I oppose is putting all these regulations into sports betting, which only help the big guys, only help the large casinos, or only help the major entities. And it doesn't let the mom and pop shops go in there. So if you're going to legalize sports betting and you're only going to allow those major casinos to do sports betting, you're still going to have you're going to have your bookies out there still doing it for people who don't want to gamble at Caesar's Palace. I'm greatly offended that you sugarcoat the whole sports betting with proceeds going to education. I think that's a nonsense idea. It's this way of getting a bad tasting pill down your throat. But sports betting certainly should be legalized, no doubt.
Paul Lehman.
I oppose that proposal. And when I grew up, it was a common knowledge that betting of any kind or gambling of any kind was a sin. And the fundamentalist churches listed that as one of their many sins. And now we've come to a point where we want to endorse that type of activity by the state, by the government. And so it goes against the will of the people in the past. And also the use of those funds for education that is totally erroneous and deceptive, because that money would go into the education fund, and as we know what the legislature will do, they'll say, oh, we've got all this money, so we don't need to budget any. And so the promise that will improve education or increase it is a farce and not true.
Crystal Quade.
Yeah, I do support this ballot initiative, or this measure, and this is one, again, that I wish the legislature had been able to actually get this done appropriately. I don't love everything and all of the wording in this, but we've seen for years that the status quo in Jefferson City are in gridlock and fighting with each other instead of actually moving legislation through. I think what's important about this discussion is absolutely we need to be partnering it with conversations around addiction and funding for mental health services, which Missouri is drastically failing at. But the reality is that we have currently right now people in the state of Missouri who are crossing the border in Kansas or St. Louis. If you drive over there, you can actually see them pulled over on the side of the road, placing their bets and then coming home. That is revenue that we're missing out on. And due to all of the corporate tax cuts that have been happening in the state of Missouri and the tax cuts for the wealthiest in our state, we do have a shortage of funding in our state for things like education, mental health care, and all of the things that we desperately want to support. And so I do support this measure and the money that will come in from that.
Mike Kehoe.
So all of our surrounding states already have sports gambling as a product that their citizens can take advantage of. We're sitting in the center of an area that does not have it. So if you want to be competitive with your surrounding states, whether that's economic-wise or to the representative's points, people are driving across the state line, placing those bets. I think this is something that's time for Missouri. I'm not a fan of gambling, and I don't bet on games, but I believe it's a tool that we need for Missourians to additional recreation for those. I do think what the ballot measure provides funding for is appropriate, because I've been a big fan of making sure our public education gets funded, and then we would make sure, should I be selected governor, that the legislature would never be able to move that to some other category. We'll keep it to where it's at. And last but not least, I mean, we have some gems in our state that are called major league sports teams. They provide a lot of entertainment, a lot of economic benefit to our state, and this would be something that would help us ensure those teams potentially stay in the state of Missouri.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Lucas, and it will go first to Paul Lehman. Lucas?
Thank you. Missouri's budget for the current fiscal year is around $50 billion, including both state and federal funds. That's about double of what it was a decade ago. What do you think about the size of Missouri's budget, and are there any areas you want to cut or areas you'd like to spend more?
Paul?
Thank you. Hello, Southeast Missouri. I don't know the details of that, but what I know in general is that the budget is probably not big enough, because we have an education system that is broken and underfunded. We have an agricultural system that, or I should say, people living in rural areas who don't have medical care, and the hospitals are leaving the country in the rural areas and leaving people stranded. We have so much poverty in the U.S. The kids in my local school at Fayette, half of them have to take free lunches. So the budget needs to be reallocated, less money for the National Guard to send them down to Texas, where they twiddle their thumbs while they're down there, and bring them back, use that money for education and other areas and for environmental transition.
Crystal Quade.
With our budget being the largest that it's been and continuing to grow, I know folks are very frustrated when we continue to rank on the bottom for everything in the entire country. From the lowest paid teachers to the lowest education funding. As mentioned, we've lost 18 rural hospitals in the last decade. We've got parts of our state that still don't have access to broadband internet. We've got roads and bridges crumbling. We have police officer shortages everywhere in the state of Missouri. The city of St. Louis alone, it needs 300 additional police officers to do their jobs. We are not balancing our budget well. I like to call our budget a moral document, or at least it should be, and we should be investing in people to make their everyday lives better, not putting in pork special interests for whatever legislator is trying to get something done for their hometown. We need to be really investing in the needs of everyday citizens.
Mike Kehoe.
Well, I've been proud to be a part of the budget process, and it has been growing, and it's grown too much. But we're going to see some tougher times on the horizon ahead, and I know for a fact that we're going to want somebody in the governor's office who understands what budgets are about and what hard decisions are about. We need to make sure we continue to fund, and we have continued to fund, our essential services and public safety and education. But as we go forward, we're going to have to make sure that we have somebody who's ready to make a decision on how the budget gets crafted as we move forward. The budget has grown most of all from the last couple of years through federal resources that came after the COVID crisis. But our general revenues has grown as well, and that's a good thing. That means our economy is growing, and I'm a big fan of making sure businesses can survive and grow, because that's what it takes to give Missourians opportunities. But the budget is going to be tough the next couple of years, and I would suggest you're going to want somebody there who understands what a budget's about and how to craft this going forward.
Bill Slants.
I see this very differently from my other three opponents up here. I think the Missouri budget should be cut in half, if not more. I would first end personal property tax. Also, let's end the income tax, state income tax in Missouri. You cut the 50% of the budget if you stop taxpayer-funded education. Taxpayer-funded education isn't working. You could throw more money at it all you want. It still isn't going to work. Local education is the way to manage this. Manage it with your local communities. Taxpayer-funded social services should be completely eliminated. This is also something that should be managed at the local level. Statewide, people in Jefferson City have no idea what's going on in Joplin that way. You have to manage these things locally and let the local communities take care of their education, let the local communities take care of their things. If need be, if you have to fill the coffers up, let's do it with a usage tax. You could do it through sales tax and fuel tax. But we don't need an income tax. We don't need personal property tax.
All right, our next question will come from Alvin, and we'll go first to Crystal Quade. Alvin?
There's a large focus nationally about immigration at our nation's southern border. As governor, are there any state policies related to immigration that you would support or oppose? Or do you think that the state policymakers should stay out of this topic?
Crystal?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. The conversation around immigration right now in our country is real, and I know that so many Missourians are really nervous right now about the rise in crime and potential tying to that. Of course, we hear a lot about the parallels along with drug increase and trafficking in the state of Missouri. But here's the thing. As governor, the first thing that I would do, of course, is to work with our federal delegation. There's a bipartisan immigration bill that has been sitting in Washington for far too long. And as governor, I would work with our federal delegation to lean into that and make sure that we're getting something done. When it comes to what we can be doing right here, I want to talk about what we're doing to keep our communities safe and going to the conversation that I previously mentioned of our shortage of law enforcement professionals and giving them the tools that they need to be successful. As mentioned, the city of St. Louis is down 300 officers. We just very recently had an entire division shut down because they didn't have anyone who would come work for the police force. And it's not just about raising salaries, it's about benefits, and it's about giving them the tools that they need to keep our communities safe. So as governor, my focus will be right here on Missouri, making sure that we're safe at home.
Mike Kehoe.
Yeah, immigration is the number one conversation I have, along with crime, as we travel the state and meet Missourians. It's absolutely out of control. Missouri has an estimated 77,000 illegal immigrants. We don't know exactly because there's not a database of those. And just in 2023 alone, we talked about the state budget. Missouri spent over $460 million on illegal immigrants. That could have been money that went to our teachers, or to our veterans, or back to our Missouri taxpayers. Along with the illegal immigration are coming deadly fentanyl drugs, Chinese deadly fentanyl drugs. I went to the border twice. I'm the only candidate, I believe, that's probably been down there twice. I've seen our men and women in our National Guard. They are working, they are brave, they are helping at the border. Along with our State Highway Patrol in McAllen, Texas, where 1 year alone, they saw over 450 million doses of lethal fentanyl come across the border. It's killing our citizens. It's the number one killer of Missourians between 18 and 44. We need to stop the drugs and the gangs that are coming across the borders. They're hurting Missourians. They're hurting Missourian families.
Bill Slants.
Everyone in this room is a descendant of an immigrant. I welcome all immigrants. All I ask is that you sign the guest book on your way in. Immigrants provide a tremendous amount of great labor and great skills in this country the state needs. And I welcome them all. Like I said, just sign the guest book. We want to know you're here. We want to know what you're doing and why you're here. But fixing a major problem there, it would be to eliminate all taxpayer funds to anyone who's not contributing to society. Eliminate all taxpayer funds to immigrants. There's no housing, no food, no support, no social services for an immigrant that's coming in without any documentation, without anything at all. So let them support themselves, and welcome all. Thank you.
Paul Lehman.
There are the immigrants, contrary to their being an expense on the government, they are an asset. I've just read an article that says that the immigrants produce $6.8 million of income for the state, and that they pay taxes also, whether documented or undocumented. Their employer is paying the taxes, but it's through them. And so what the problem at the border is the bottleneck of processing. We need to, our Green Party candidate Jill Stein would upgrade that to the processing process. And in Missouri, we would also implement programs to integrate the immigrants who are already here, and to try to teach them English, to help them with their social programs, and bring them out of the shadow and make them a full partner in our great economy.
All right, the next question will come from Christine and go first to Mike Kehoe. Christine?
Missouri currently uses tax credits as an incentive for a lot of things, for specific businesses to expand, to renovate historic buildings, to develop affordable housing, or to encourage donations to food pantries. These tax credits collectively subtracted $669 million from Missouri's treasury in 2023. Do you believe changes are needed to Missouri's tax credit structure? If so, what would you change?
Mike Kehoe.
Well, thank you for the question. Tax credits are something that absolutely need to be looked at to make sure they're giving a good return on investment to Missourians. We have several tax credit programs that don't do that. However, we have some that really do that well. And that's something that, as a business person looks at any kind of program that they have within their business, you have to make sure it's something, again, that's working for Missouri citizens, and it's something that we couldn't do without. For instance, our Housing Development Corporation, back when Ronald Reagan was president, he said the federal government cannot build housing, which they can't, and so they turned it over to a private-public development where we can use tax credits to build affordable housing across our communities. We've worked very hard to get that program more accountable in the last several years, raising the responsibility for the developer and ensuring Missourians get a good return on their investment. But there are other tax credit programs, quite frankly, that need to be looked at and revamped, and I would love to be able to do that and try to get that all in front of people so we make sure the right ones are going out to the right people.
Bill Slants.
My father always says less is more. I've already told you I'd like to eliminate the income tax of the state, and I would like to end tax credits. That's all I have.
Paul Lehman.
I think tax credits are good. They're important to help people with their, struggling to make ends meet, to make the dollar go farther. However, often these are extended to the working poor who don't even pay taxes. So there's no incentive or no benefit to those people. So what needs to happen is a fundamental shift and change in the way we do business in our state, and so that we can support the working poor and lift up the middle class as well.
Crystal Quade.
I do support those tax credits. We're sitting in a very district that utilizes historic tax credits all the time. As somebody who's served on the budget committee in our state legislature, I will say I would like to see some more oversight, as mentioned, to make sure that the return on investment for the tax credits that we're currently allowing to happen are actually good investments that are benefiting our state. But I want to have an even bigger conversation around tax credits and who they're actually helping and how we can expand on tax credits for everyday Missourians. One of the things that I hear the most about from folks is the problem with finding affordable and accessible child care. And then I also hear at the same time the enormous expense that our families are taking on for elder care. One tax credit that I would like to support, and I've had this discussion in Jefferson City and filed legislation, is tax credits for early childhood education and tax credits for elder care. So many of our families are stuck in the middle where they've got a kiddo in daycare and then they're also taking care of their aging parents. And we as a state, when we're talking about tax credits, again, need to be putting everyday working class Missourians at the forefront of these discussions.
Thank you. The next question will come from Lucas and go first to Bill Slants. Lucas.
While we're on the tax discussion, Missouri's individual income tax rate is set to decline to 4.7% in January, marking the fourth straight year of tax cuts. Do you support further tax cuts to Missouri's income tax rates or other taxes such as sales or property taxes? If so, do you have a plan to offset a portion of the lost tax revenues?
Bill Slants.
Well, we've heard my answer to this question already, but 4.7 is a good number to start with. But bringing it down to 0 is a much better number. My plan, if you need to fill the coffers with some kind of money, would be on use tax. You would do that through either through sales tax or fuel tax. But by eliminating 50% of the Missouri budget, this amount of increase in sales and use tax would be very small, a small portion of that increase. What this does is it actually puts the services that Missouri is providing. It puts that directly in that phase. So your fuel tax is going to pave the highways and help build the infrastructure, and sales tax will take care of the rest of the budget. So don't know if I answered your question, but that's how I try to manage that, or try to get that through. Take it from 4.7 down to 0.
Paul Lehman.
4.7% doesn't sound like a very much when you're making $100,000 or $1 million. People can live on very nicely on the income left after paying their taxes. We need to have a graduated income tax. I'm not familiar with the details, so that the wealthy in our state, and we have a lot of them, can pay more their fair share. In the biblical analogy, you have the 10 talents, 5 talents, 2 talents, 1 talent parable. They often forget that the 10-talent person is paying back 10 talents, and whereas the 1 talent is supposed to pay back 1. So the burden, there needs to be a shift in taxation. And also another way to approach this is to provide universal health care, which is a major expense in people's lives. So we need to adopt that so that people have more income and the wealthy can support that opportunity to have equal access to health care.
Crystal Quade.
Yeah, as governor, I want to have a real conversation around a fair tax structure. I don't think a lot of Missourians realize that right now in the state of Missouri, that the tax bracket, the top tax bracket, if you make $8,500 a year, you are paying the exact same tax rate as a millionaire. And so, yes, the time in Jefferson City that I've been there, we've seen a lot of tax cuts. We've seen income tax cuts, we've seen tax cuts for corporations and for the wealthiest in the state of Missouri. I want to have conversations around taxes that actually impact, again, everyday working class folks. Conversations around getting rid of things like the food tax. I know as a mom, when I go grocery shopping for my family, I see the increased cost of buying groceries every single day is a real thing that's impacting folks. I want to have conversations around taxes on feminine hygiene products or diapers. Again, things that are impacting everyday Missourians, and a real true evaluation of our tax structure in the state so that the wealthiest here are paying their fair share and that we're able to make up those differences by taxing things like private planes or other things that the wealthiest are getting by with in our state while the rest of us are struggling to get by.
Mike Kehoe.
You know, this is a conversation that we have constantly about what's the appropriate structure. I believe there should be zero income tax, but you have to do it responsibly. You have to get it to a point where you're not affecting essential services and education. And when I tell people that story, they're like, how is that possible? I'm like, well, 5 years ago, we were at 6%, and now we're about to be at 4.7%. But you haven't seen any cuts to education or essential services. There's a way to manage this correctly. And most importantly, I believe that Missourians can spend their money way better than any elected official could ever spend it. Missourians understand what to do once they have more money in their pocket. It's the largest amount of tax Missourians pay each year, and I believe putting money in their pocket is much more essential. And last but not least, when it comes to economic development and you want us to compete as a state, as your governor, when I go compete for businesses to move here or existing businesses to expand, I need to be able to have the same tools in the toolbox that Tennessee and Texas and Florida and other states do when they go have those meetings in the boardroom with those large companies that want to invest and create jobs in our state. That's the way we grow our economy. That's the way we provide opportunities for Missourians.
The next question will come from Alvin. It will go first to Paul Lehman. Alvin?
Missouri generally prohibits local governments from enacting their own firearms restrictions. Should the state give local governments greater authority to pass their own gun ordinances? Are there any state-level firearm laws that you would support, such as a red flag law, a 72-hour waiting period, or tax breaks to encourage the purchase of gun safes and trigger locks?
Paul Lehman.
That should be, in a sense, a separate issue as far as the state regulations of firearms. But on the local level, the problem that struck me is about local control. We've gone the wrong way about taking away local control on various issues like whether or not they want a polluting Kehoe in their backyard. They're not allowed to do that, or to determine the budget for policing in Kansas City. That's another avenue of taking local control away from the local community. And as was said here just a minute ago, Missourians know how to take care of themselves, and they don't need the state to dictate to them what they can and can't do on a local level. And so I believe that there needs to be an increased effort to control firearms, to ban assault weapons. Would be a good start, and then do a great background check. Okay.
Crystal Quade.
Yeah, I grew up in rural southwest Missouri, and so I understand firsthand the need for firearms when you've got a copperhead coming after your chickens, right? Like, I understand that. But I also understand the real conversations that we need to be having in the state of Missouri. You know, I've talked with law enforcement officers all across the state and asked them, what is it that you need to be successful? And one of the things we hear the most about is access to firearms, particularly with youth. You know, just very recently, we had a school shooting at CVPA in St. Louis, where unfortunately people died. That family reached out to law enforcement officers multiple times for them to come out and meet with the family because that person who had access was in a mental health crisis, and they wanted those guns to be taken away just temporarily while they were able to keep that child safe and get them the help that they needed. Law enforcement could not actively go in and do their jobs, and because of that, we had people die. When we talk about the conversation around local control, of course, what's going on in Webster County where I grew up is different than what's going on in inner city St. Louis. And I do support the conversation around letting communities decide what is best for them, working with their law enforcement officers, working with parents and their local municipalities to find out what really will be helpful.
Mike Kehoe.
One of the most fundamental rights we have as citizens of this country is our Second Amendment rights. I grew up in a different environment in inner city St. Louis, and it was an environment that was multiple gangs were literally right outside the door of our house. None of those folks that were carrying weapons then or today went to the store to purchase them. So every time we put more restrictions on a citizen's Second Amendment rights, we actually hurt the citizens who are trying to do this law-abiding and legally. We need to make sure we understand that as we move forward, we don't infringe on those rights. We continue to work with existing laws and support our police to reduce crime, improve mental health, and make sure that we're doing the right thing to take the criminals off the street and not allow them to be there to acquire these weapons. Second Amendment rights will always be something that I am very strong to work on and to make sure we protect for all Missourians and all people across this country.
Bill Slants.
I agree. The Second Amendment should not be infringed. I don't see where local gun laws are going to help at all. In local gun law, if you're traveling from county to county and that law happens to be different from one county to the next, what's going to happen to the gun holder that has got a gun in his car? This community says yes, that community says no, and now you're driving across county lines, and it gets kind of messy. So I can't agree to any type of gun control in that way. Mike is absolutely right. Criminals do not buy guns from stores. Law-abiding citizens register their guns and let people know they're going to use them, which I don't even agree with there. I think if you want to buy a gun, go buy a gun, and I don't need to even let anybody know I bought it. But I see no purpose for gun control at all.
The next question comes from Christine, goes first to Crystal Quade. Christine?
Virtually every governor in every state talks about the importance of good jobs for residents. How would you encourage economic development in Missouri? Are there particular sectors or types of jobs that you would emphasize?
Crystal Quade.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Good jobs is one of the most important things that a governor can do, is to set the stage and the plans for this. Look, the reality is that I think as a state we need to understand that not everybody needs a four-year degree, and not everybody wants to go to college. And so step one is making sure that we have good pathways to good paying jobs that provide good benefits, partnering with folks like our labor unions and our local community colleges and giving them the support that they need to train up talent that is accessible for our business owners. You know, when we talk to business owners, it's imperative that we ask them, what do you need in a trained workforce, and that we're working together to be able to provide that. But the other thing that's really important about bringing good jobs to the state of Missouri are things like infrastructure, things like access to internet, things like access to health care. As mentioned, you know, there are places in the state that don't have access to broadband right now. As mentioned, there are places in the state of Missouri where folks drive almost an hour to get to an emergency room. So when you're a small business owner trying to recruit somebody to come work for you in some of our rural parts of our state, and you tell them that we have underfunded education systems, you're not going to be able to get to a doctor within an hour in case you have an emergency. Oh, and you might not have internet for your teenager. They're not going to want to come to Missouri.
Mike Kehoe.
I'm proud to have a record of creating hundreds of jobs for Missourians across the state in my several businesses that I owned, with the help of a lot of people, by the way. So workforce development and making sure Missourians have an opportunity is essential to how the state continues to grow. You know, a little over 60% of Missourians do not attend a four-year college or university. We have some great colleges and universities, including right here in Springfield and across the state. But we also need to provide an opportunity for those men and ladies whose heart is in a different spot. So improving career and technical education opportunities across our state is vital to me. Working with labor, working with other organizations that have incredible training programs to put people on the job and get them in a nice, high-paying, skilled wage is very important to us. That's how we grow our state economy. Putting more money in Missourians' pockets always results in a good outcome. And I believe with my experience of actually creating jobs across the state, we'll be the jobs leader should I be elected governor.
Bill Slants.
I agree with Mike. California, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, companies are flying out of those states at a massive rate here because of high tax rates. You want to create good jobs here in the state of Missouri. Get rid of the business income tax. Get rid of the business tax period. Don't tax these businesses. Let those businesses use their proceeds to pay and train their employees. This is the best way to get good jobs in the state of Missouri. Get rid of any business tax you have there. You'll see the jobs come.
Paul Lehman.
Of course, we need good jobs, but we need to stop the slide away from that. So when people talk about creating jobs, they're usually talking about low income, low wage jobs that are paid to sometimes minimum wage or a little better, a little above that, and not a living wage, which would be more like $25 an hour, and that's even low. So in the farming sector, which I have a special interest in, the farmers are leaving the land because they're not getting the money for their labor and proper labor. And that's because of these industrial agricultural complex that's driving farmers off the land and preventing them from growing. We talk about regulation. Small businesses are over-regulated so that they can't function. And if we had the universal health care, that would be one thing that they wouldn't have to worry about in their efforts.
The next question will come from Lucas and go first to Mike Kehoe.
It seems there has been an increase in online threats made by juveniles against other students in schools and in some cases businesses. What, if anything, do you think should be done about this at the state level?
Mike Kehoe.
Well, thank you, Lucas, for the question. Just coincidentally, I had a long conversation about with a sheriff from Cole County last night about this very issue. We really are struggling right now with juvenile officers across the state and making sure they're in the right position and we make sure we have access to them, because should a young person go online and make some sort of threat, the local law enforcement can pick that person up, but then they get turned over to the juvenile officer. I believe that we need to work with the courts and with lawmakers to make sure we have different penalties for juveniles that would assess threats, especially as threats against schools and other institutions that really create chaos within that institution, and then give the juvenile officers the tools they need to deal with those juveniles once they're turned over to them. They do not have the right tools in the toolbox to do that right now. These threats are serious, and a lot of it has to come from supervision. A lot of it has to come from parenting skills and guardian skills that are making sure that these young folks understand that when you're doing this, you're affecting a lot of lives and there are going to be real consequences that come with it.
Bill Slants.
Yeah, I'm saddened by the growth of online threats in this state and around the country. And some of them are done by cowards. Online is not confronting your opponent and avoiding getting punched in the nose. Mike touched on a good point. Supervision, when you're talking especially about juveniles, younger juveniles, and I know this is virtually impossible today, but supervision and discipline at the local level, at the parent level, at the clergy level is the best way to combat this, convincing young people that this is just the wrong way to go about doing things. But it's going to happen, and it can't be avoided.
Paul Lehman.
I'm sorry, I was reeling from my last answer. What was the question?
Yeah, it seems there's been an increase in online threats made by juveniles against other students in schools, in some cases businesses. What, if anything, do you think should be done by this at the state level?
I just heard a program that said that students learn more when they read from paper than they do by reading from a tablet, an online tablet. So to address the issue, one thing that we need to do in our schools is to return to paper learning, because that's the most effective way. And also the state can do a lot to control the traffic on these conglomerate internet companies, and need to study that and find ways to control that abuse that's done on the line.
Crystal Quade.
Yeah, actually on Monday, I was in St. Louis at an event, and I had a middle schooler come up to me and asked if she could ask me a question, and she started to cry, and she said, "I'm scared to go to school." And then that very next day in St. Louis, up in Ladue, the high school had to shut down because of a threat. And I know right here at home, we had 2 in Nixa yesterday at elementary schools. This is a real problem, and we need to be listening to our young people about how absolutely terrified they are right now. When it comes to solutions in this space, yes, absolutely. We need to have conversations around actually making sure there are enough law enforcement officers and juvenile officers and that we're funding them. You know, we've had the same folks in charge in Jefferson City for 20 years, but yet we're still underfunding and we can't find enough people to work in these spaces. That's a real problem. But then we also need to have conversations around mental health care. I'm a parent, I've had people in mental health crisis, and I've tried to access care and have gone through weeks and weeks of loopholes trying to find someone, and actually told that I had to send my family member to California to get them the help that they need. We have a real crisis happening right now, not just in our state and in our country, and we need real leaders who are gonna have honest conversations around what's going on.
The next question comes from Alvin. It will go first to Bill Slants. Alvin?
We're going to stay on school safety. Now, you mentioned your thoughts on banning any type of weapon, but if we are going to keep schools safe, what are your thoughts on how exactly we can keep students safe in their schools?
Bill Slants.
So first and foremost, thank you. First and foremost, I'm serious when I say that taxpayer-funded education should end. This should bring local education or education to the local community. So we're going to put that on the local community to police their safety. If we had schoolhouses that were in the community and not in a rural area where we had to bus kids in on a daily basis, where we had smaller schools with more focused teachers, I think this issue of school safety would become a lot less invasive. So I'm all about educating the children. I question whether or not the state should even have a mandate against education, but certainly we should educate children at the local level.
Paul Lehman.
All of the mass school shootings have been done with weapons that were registered. And so we need to do, as Crystal was indicating, we need to address the mental health crisis that our country is in, that we need to devote more money and more efforts to our mental health division of the state, and so that they can go into schools and counsel students. We need to bar the assault rifle, the weapon of choice, and do more diligence, as we are doing, about keeping kids safe in the school setting. So it's important that we focus on the big picture of why is the U.S. society so vicious in our gun activity, whereas compared to other countries all around the world.
Crystal Quade.
I had the great honor of serving on the Springfield Public Schools Task Force for many years, while here in our local community we were evaluating what school buildings needed improvements and what we could do from a local community level. And so by doing that, I've learned a lot about so many of our buildings across the state that match up with this that are very old. A lot of our kiddos are going to elementary schools that were built in the early 1900s. And we can do a lot from an investment standpoint in terms of infrastructure, looking at the vestibules and making sure that there is like a level of entry before somebody from the outside gets inside to the office. A lot of our schools here locally in Springfield have moved to that, things like bulletproof glass, et cetera, that we can do from a state level to invest in. But the reality is again, we shouldn't be making our schools like a prison for our kids to be in and to stay safe in. So I want to have real conversations around investments with our local law enforcement officers to give them the tools that they need to be successful. And one of the things they continually talk to me about is the fact that kids have access to firearms and there's literally nothing that they can do about it. And so from a state level, it's about making investments to keep our buildings safe, doing what we can there, but then also working with our law enforcement.
Mike Kehoe.
Again, one of the fundamental problems with this issue is our young people have lost a respect for life, and I think that's starting at all levels in our society right now. That's the number one challenge, along with, has been mentioned up here multiple times, the mental health issues that we face. As I tell people all the time, it's the number one problem in our country that nobody wants to talk about. All families, including my own, have had struggles with mental health issues, and so making sure we have the appropriate professionals within the schools to identify kids who need help, I think is very important. I also think investing in school resource officers or SROs, making sure that school districts have those men and ladies available on campus, that they have the appropriate training along with the faculty on what to have happen should one of these unfortunate events come forward. And then I think we can use technology. We have an incredible advantage right now in this country of technology that can detect various things that come into schools and make sure we monitor them so we have an advance warning if something unfortunate were to happen.
Right. We have time for one final question. Christine?
The Missouri Chamber of Commerce has stated the state faces a child care crisis because of a shortage of affordable providers. Do you agree, and what, if anything, would you propose to do about this?
Paul Lehman, you're first.
We need to enable more people to engage in child care. I think that a couple years ago there was further restrictions on what you could do to take care of children. That's one thing. We need to have universal health care so that monies can be used to provide child care and support the child care givers who need to do these things. And so it's broken. I mean, we have a broken system that needs to be corrected, and we need to value our child care givers and pay them a decent salary.
Crystal Quade?
You know, when I first started running for office in 2015, and I would knock doors and I'd ask folks, what do you want from your state government? The number one thing I heard from folks was affordable childcare. And that's why one of the very first bills I filed when I got to Jefferson City had to do with affordable childcare. And I've been working on that issue ever since. And quite frankly, I'm really glad that folks in charge are starting to have this conversation, because I know people like my mom have been struggling with this for decades. When it comes to what we can do around childcare, the first thing that I want to say is the state of Missouri is drastically failing with this. I don't know if you all saw recently in the news the past few weeks, but the state of Missouri right now is not even paying its child care providers bills on time. We have lost 53 child care providers in the last year because the state of Missouri is not meeting its basic promises of what we are paying them for our subsidies and our foster kids. I've been meeting with child care providers all across the state, having conversation, asking how much are you owed, hundreds of thousands of dollars. These people are taking out personal loans to be able to keep their business afloat, and we talk about supporting small businesses, and we can't even meet these basic promises that we're doing. I want to have robust conversations around how we can increase not just access but affordability, but step one is making sure that the government is doing what it's promised and paying its bills on time to our child care providers.
Mike Kehoe?
The state is in a child care crisis, and this is a very personal issue to me. I can tell you as a young man, I watched my mother make a decision. Does she go to work and leave her child at home on a snow day so she can make enough money to buy groceries, or does she not go to work and not have enough money to buy groceries and stay home with her child? That's a decision no parent, especially no single mother, should ever have to face. The good news about the child care crisis, it's nonpartisan. This is not a Democrat or a Republican issue. This is a Missouri issue. We have $1.4 billion with a B of labor sitting at home annually in the state of Missouri because those working folks want to go to work and can't get child care. We need to make sure these facilities are safe, but we have to promote the ability for child care centers to open. We have to give options to businesses that want to build child care centers within their business, like they have here in Springfield at Cox Health, like they have in Kansas City at Burns and McDonald Engineering. Those are the type of outside-the-box ideas we have to do to improve access to child care. And then I am in favor of the child care tax credit. I think that was a good move that we need to get through, and as governor, it will be a priority for me.
Bill Slants?
Child care is not should not be a state mandate. The state has no business in child care whatsoever. One of the reasons, or a reason why both parents are unable to stay home is because over the last 60 years, affordability of living at home has grown by 8 times. Used to be a single parent income could take care of a $20,000 house without an issue. Now a $400,000 house has to be paid for by both parents, which means the child has to be left alone. But in the bottom line, child care should be taken care of at the local community again, and by the home of the parents or home of the grandparents in some people's cases.
We will now go to closing statements. Paul Lehman, you are first, and you may begin.
Yes. I want to first start by saying that we can't cover everything today, but one of the looming clouds over the state of Missouri and over the nation and over the world is the opposition of the United States for a ceasefire in Gaza and in Palestine. And this war is beginning to spin out of control simply because we cannot force the Israelis to come to the table and do a ceasefire. So having said that, I want to pivot back to the U.S. What that does is that it affects the environment that we live in. And so the gun violence is in an environment of gun control. And so we have to change the environment and change our attitude about people and stop treating people as the other or as someone who is the enemy, someone that we cannot control, or that we must control. So we need to incorporate people into our... I'll stop.
Bill Slants.
Well, first of all, it's a great honor to be here, and thank you very much for having us. The candidates on stage right now are not here as a get-rich-quick scheme. These are the four of us standing in front of you are offering their leadership. It's not something that is going to make us wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, and not even something that's going to make us all that powerful. We're here as virtual volunteers to care for the state and provide you with the best possible way of living that Missouri can possibly live in. I'm going to finish with what I started with. I think it's very importantly to the state would be to focus on eliminating most of the burdensome taxes that we have. The personal property tax and income tax needs to be given away. And we can do that by cutting half the budget. And I appreciate you having me here today. Thank you.
Mike Kehoe.
Well, thank you again for the Press Association for hosting this and for the candidates that would be there. You know, I spent 40 years of my career as a small businessman creating jobs and opportunities for Missourians and rewarding success, not punishing it. If businesses and people want to do good, they should be allowed to do so. And I think government should play a role in that, not in creating jobs, but creating an environment where good jobs can grow and prosper. That's the administration I want to bring to Missourians. We want to continue, as I mentioned, with the career and technical training so that Missourians can take advantage of very good jobs with benefits that are out there. But first, we need to keep our Missourians safe. We need to keep our community safe. That will be the priority for me on day one. We need to make sure that we fund and give the resources to our men and ladies in the police departments and public safety all across the state, the resources they need to keep Missourians safe so Missourians can walk their own neighborhoods at night without ever having to be afraid. These are the things I'd like to do for you as governor, and I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th.
Crystal Quade.
Well, thank you again to the Press Association and for the candidates for being here. I grew up a regular working class kid. My mom was a waitress most of my life, and my stepfather drove almost an hour to get to the factory. And because of their hard work and dedication, I'm the very first in my family to graduate high school. And I worked my way through Missouri State University to become a social worker. I got involved in government because there weren't enough regular people at the table making decisions. But I'm running for governor because we deserve better than what we've been getting. As mentioned here today, we rank lowest in education funding in the entire country. We have crumbling roads and bridges. We've lost 18 rural hospitals in the last decade. We have police officer shortages all across the state of Missouri, and we deserve better than this. Instead of investing in the things that matter most, what we have seen from my opponent and folks on the other side in Jefferson City are these continued government overreaches into our personal lives, whether it is in our doctor's offices, what books our kids can read. The focus of what's been coming out of Jefferson City is absolutely wrong. As your governor, I will get politicians out of your doctor's offices, out of your personal lives, and I will protect your freedoms. Thank you guys for being here.
Well, that concludes the Missouri Press Association candidate forums for governor. If you stick around in 20 minutes, we'll have Senate candidates on stage. But now is the time to give your applause to these gubernatorial candidates.